My name is Joe Peroni, and this is the Rise Above Project. And today I want to talk about Jeff Beck. Many people know him as one of the greatest guitar players who ever lived. The reason why I want to talk about this is because he's exceptional. He is one of the greatest guitar players who ever lived. And it does affect me, even though I'm not a musician. Jeff Beck died January 11th, 2023, and he was 78 years old. There's really nothing more that I can say about Jeff Beck that hasn't been said. So you're probably wondering, why am I doing this show then? Well, I want to take a look at this from a psychological perspective because I am a marriage and family therapist. I'm not a master musician, and there are many people on YouTube and other places that are way more talented than I am, and they're way more credentialed in order to talk about Jeff Beck as a guitar player. And so I'm going to let them do that. I enjoy those shows, and they're very insightful to me as well. However, I'm just a fan. And I want to talk about Jeff Beck because I think he is also a very inspiring human being. And there's a few things that I think we can all take into account about his life. So here's a question, right? Like, who is Jeff Beck? And one of the things I could tell you is that if you have a favorite guitar player, Jeff Beck is his favorite guitar player. Everybody who is an amazing musician or a great guitar player, all the greats, they all look up to Jeff Beck. And if you know a guitar teacher out there, I can almost guarantee you that that guitar teacher, his favorite guitar player, is Jeff Beck. So what am I hinting at here? What I'm hinting at is that he was popular among lay people, let's say. But not really when you start to figure out some of the numbers. And I'm going to go over that in a little bit. So what's one of the things of the many that we can learn from Jeff Beck? And from what I see is that I think we all need to get down to basics of basing our happiness off of how true we are to ourselves, and not bending and twisting in the wind depending on what other people want or what the culture says. And I think Jeff Beck was a perfect example of this. Jeff Beck was incredibly unique. He did things his own way. He expressed his art in the way that he wanted to. And he never changed one note, one phrase, one anything in order to appeal to more people. I've never seen a musician care less about trying to be more popular, to sell more records or anything like that. He played exactly what he felt. If there was a sound that he heard in his head, he could reproduce it on the guitar, and that's what he did. And if fans or people understood it, great. If not, no biggie. He made no concessions. He wasn't trying to be the most popular guy on the block. And he continuously, since the 60s, all the way up until the day that he died, he continuously raised music to a higher and higher level. And he was never interested in just feeding off of the status quo. And I always thought, if I had ever interviewed him, like what he actually thought about that, because it takes a tremendous amount of self-esteem to be like that. So let me get into some examples of, I want to compare Jeff Beck to his contemporaries. And so it will dig in a lot more about what I'm saying, about it is more important to seek your truth into your art of who you are, as opposed to trying to make the masses happy. So Jeff Beck, when he died, his net worth was $18 million, and he sold 5 million records, give or take. Now, he wasn't poor. he did very well. He sold a lot of records. He made a lot of money. He was worth a lot of money. $18 million is extraordinary. He's definitely extremely successful. However, his contemporaries, And let's talk about mostly the British contemporaries of his age and where basically he lived. And let's compare them to those people who he was around all the time and made music and throughout the years, sometimes with them and sometimes maybe in a competition type of way. So let's take a look at Jimmy Page, for example. Jimmy Page, if you don't know, guitar player for Led Zeppelin, who was also in the Yardbirds with Jeff Beck. Jimmy Page is worth $180 million and sold 300 million records. Let's take Eric Clapton, who was also in the Yardbirds with Jeff Beck. They were in the same band. Eric Clapton has sold in his career he's worth $450 million, and he sold over 280 million records. Peter Townsend from The Who, as you can see, I'm a big fan. He's worth over $150 million, and he has sold over 100 million records. David Gilmour from Pink Floyd, $180 million he's worth, and he has sold over, it says, 250 million records. Keith Richards from the Rolling Stones, worth over $500 million, sold 240 million records. And let's put Rod Stewart on this list because Rod Stewart started off as Jeff Beck's singer. Rod Stewart left that band. And how did Rod Stewart do? Well, he sold 250 million records and his net worth is over $250 million. Now, as we can see, all of these people did, 10, 20, 50, 100 times better than Jeff Beck did financially. And yet, every one of these people I mentioned would tell you that Jeff Beck is the better guitar player. And so I wonder how it is in everybody else's life. Like, do you think fame is most important? Do you think money is most important? Or do you think sticking to what you believe and just being a good person is what counts? Because sometimes fame and fortune, although Jeff Beck had that, his fame and fortune was nothing compared to the people around him all of them would tell you that Jeff Beck was better than all those people. Let's add Jimi Hendrix to the list, as you can see right behind me. This is an interesting one. Jimi Hendrix died in 1970. At that time, he was worth $20,000. Now, by today's standards, that's about $150,000. But so what? That's not a lot of money at all when you consider the numbers that I just read you. However, obviously, Jimi Hendrix died over 50 years ago. During that time, Jeff Beck has been making albums. He's been recording. He's been touring. He's been doing everything a musician would do. And during that time, again, he died at worth $18 million. Jimi Hendrix hasn't done anything because he's been dead since 1970, and his estate is worth over $180 million. So technically speaking, Jimi Hendrix has done better dead than Jeff Beck has while being alive and breaking his back and working his fingers to the bone, literally, for 50 years, which I think is really interesting. I wonder if he ever really thought about that. Later on in the show, I want to talk about how his videos on YouTube, there's one of them that has about 9 million, but that's because he collaborated with Beth Hart. And some of his collaborations do have more views. But overall, even his top songs that he's done, most of them, or if not almost all of them, have less than 1 million views, which is really interesting because it shows you that he's not incredibly popular with the average crowd. But again, if you're a musician and you love music and you understand music and you have any conceptualization of what it takes to be a musician, you think Jeff Beck's the best, which is, I find very interesting. So what I want to do later, and hopefully I'm not being too disrespectful here, so I'm going to say that up front, that's why I'm going to do this maybe towards the end, is that I want to read you some of the lyrics of some of the songs that are coming out today that have 20, 30, 40, 50 million views. Again, 50 times the popularity of Jeff Beck, who is an astonishing musician, maybe one of the greatest, or maybe the greatest guitar player of all time. So what else can we learn from Jeff Beck? Because people in the industry know he's the alpha, right? He was the alpha. He was the best of the best. And what do we know, or what do we hear about alphas today? You know, you need to be a little bit meaner, nasty. You don't have to be conceding to anybody. You don't have to be that nice. Well, how did Jeff Beck handle it? He was always humble, always. He was always humble enough to work with other people, and he collaborated with people all the time. So even though he was considered to be the top dog, even when he was on stage with people, he would kind of sit back. And he didn't want to hog the spotlight. And he's always giving time and attention to other musicians to put them up front, which I think is an amazing thing to know and to learn, especially when you look in the music business about, you know, how much narcissism and egos are taking over. And here you look at somebody like Jeff Beck, who had all the reason in the world to be an egotistical idiot, and he was the exact opposite from what I can tell. Here's a short list. Here are some of the people that Jeff Beck has collaborated with: Rod Stewart, Beth Hart, Imelda May, Joss Stone, Stevie Wonder, Tina Turner, Bon Jovi. I think it Blaze of Glory, that song, everybody's like, oh my God, Bon Jovi's so great. I'm not saying he's not a good singer, but that really cool guitar playing that you're hearing in there, and in the video you don't see Jeff Beck. By the way, that's Jeff Beck. Jeff Beck basically made that whole song what it was, and then Bon Jovi puts his name there, blah, blah, blah. So everybody thinks it's Bon Jovi. But the best part of Blaze of Glory, that song, was obviously Jeff Beck's guitar. He collaborated with Brian May, who's the guitar player for Queen. He collaborated with Mick Jagger, obviously from the Rolling Stones. And what's worth mentioning here is that, you know, he collaborated with Johnny Depp. Now, Johnny Depp's a very talented guy. He's a good musician, absolutely no doubt. But he's not on the same stage as, say, David Gilmour, Jimmy Page, Peter Townsend, and Jeff Beck. But he actually went on tour with Johnny Depp, and which I think is amazing. And that music was good. I would have seen him. They played here in Las Vegas November 4th, but The Who was playing on that same day, so I chose to see The Who. But what's also worth mentioning here is that, again, looking at the money, Johnny Depp is worth over $150 million. And there's Jeff Beck in the background doing all the work, you know, all the talent in the world, and everybody praises him as they should. But he's not making 1/10 of the money that any of these other people that he collaborates with does. It's really amazing to me. So what else can we learn from Jeff Beck? I would say this: always be willing to keep your mind open and to work hard at getting better, no matter how good you might be. Always look to expand yourself and expand your value. Jeff Beck always moved forward. He always was reinventing himself. As a matter of fact, the two Jeff Beck albums, the first two, Truth and Beckola, with Rod Stewart, that was the complete template, because that was 68 and 69. That was a complete template for what Jimmy Page did with Led Zeppelin. If you listen to those two Jeff Beck albums, you will know where Jimmy Page stole most of the stuff, including the sound. It goes on to say, obviously, that if you know this stuff, that Jimmy Page and Robert Plant plagiarized like over 15 other songs of other people and were sued for it. But that's beside the point. What I'm getting is the actual sound of the music. Jeff Beck made that template for Led Zeppelin. And what did he do with it? 2 albums? Bye, I'm doing something else. So he had other things like Beck, Bogart, and Appice, where he was definitely moving in different areas. Then he went into jazz and jazz fusion and other blues, and you name it, Jeff Beck did it. He didn't stay in one place. He continued to move on and to get better and better and better. Started off in the Yardbirds, again, blues, rock, power trio. He has some of the greatest instrumentals albums that you'll ever hear. Me on a personal basis, do I listen to all of his instrumentals albums all the time? I don't. And I'll tell you the reason. It's because he's so good. And you have to, if you listen to him, He makes you plumb the depths of your soul, because the way he plays, it's not like a lot of people today where they want to play as fast as possible to impress people. He can do that. But what he also can do, and he perfected, is making every single note so important that it just makes a difference to your heart when you hear it, that you really have to sit down and absorb his music, because he's going to take you through an emotional journey. And depending on the time of day, where I'm going, I'm not in the mood for that, because he can really bring up a lot of emotions that are very, very difficult. And you can go through some of his stuff if you want, and you'll know what I'm talking about. His playing is just beautiful. So again, always move forward, always try to be great. Jeff Beck, right even before he died, he may have been playing his best stuff on the last tour that he did. His playing has just gotten so much better all the time. After all, he just stopped even using a guitar pick. His style, I don't think you can imitate it. And I think a lot of the professionals who know more about music than I do, they'll tell you the same thing, that you can't reproduce what he does. He was definitely very special. So what I want to do now, you guys can cut out now if you want. Again, I think Jeff Beck is an amazing human being. There's a lot to learn from him from a psychological point of view. And again, I'm saying this now so you can cut out, because I don't know if this is going to be disrespectful to anybody. Since I started doing this channel, and when I started my radio show, it was like 10 years ago, I always said I'm not going to fall into the thing of using profanity. I'm not going to start cursing just because other people are. I'm going to follow the way I was raised. And so what I'm going to do here, I'm going to show you what is trying to pass off as some type of musicianship today, or some type of art. But again, I'm going to pull one song. I could do it for many, but I pulled this one song. It's a rap song. And this song has over 20 million views. Keep in mind, if you have a Jeff Beck solo with no collaboration with other people like Rod Stewart, what you're going to get is less than 1 million views. And again, let me reiterate, because it's worth it. Jeff Beck is considered to be the greatest guitar player who ever lived for a lot of people. And he gets less than 1 million views. What I'm going to read you now is the art of someone who has over 20 million views on there, and plus the time difference too, right? Some of Jeff Beck's material has been out for 50 years, so I had a lot of time to build up popularity. What I'm going to do is not use the curse words. I think it'd be funnier in a way if I just use the first letter so you could see what I'm talking about, because you're not even going to know what the song is, because there's so much profanity. So let's try this. F you, you suckers, for you other N-word. I ain't effing with you. This is the gang, B-word. What the F, N-word saying? Glock in the party, strapped like a gay B-word. N-word, lane change. I carry big bills. Nah, N-word. I ain't changing. Brilliant. It's like the amount of intelligence and artisticness is there. Can you see the way music has gone lately? God, we need Jeff Beck back in the worst way, don't we? Let me continue with some of these great words. Speaking down on an N-word, you a hoe, N-word. You a B-word. Acting like you toting poles, N-word. You ain't, B-word. Catch you lacking, guaranteed it's a scope, N-word. Boom, boom. Fox out to some F-word, N-word. You a B-word. What's the sound when them hollows get to busting? Boom, boom. Some N-words getting bans and some others is B-word. Young N-word with a Shrek because you're tripping with the pole. S-word real in these streets. You gotta play it right. Don't let the B-word be the reason why you lose yo life. Never lying on this S word. I'm a gone, tell the truth. I ain't gone, rock with Buddha, F word, N word, you B word. Because the reason N words, main B words are getting effed, you know what? I'm done. This is absolute garbage that people are listening to today. Oh, please, Jeff Beck. I'm so glad that I still have your albums to listen to. You were a master musician, and it seemed like you mastered life as well. To be able to do your art in the way you wanted and to practice and practice and practice. And you were one of the, if not the best guitar player in the 60s, to still improve on that every single decade. That's something that we could all look up to. Just, somebody told me this a long time ago. You never want to retire. What you want to do is you don't want to retire from something. You want to retire into something. Because you always feel like you have a chance to get better at something. So you're not looking back on your life going, well, that was then, and I was good then, but I was younger, and now I'm not so good. And it's always best to try something new, because when you're trying from a very low level, you do have a chance to improve, even though you might be older. And somebody like Jeff Beck, up until like the last day he died, was improving himself day by day. So I really think that not only is a master musician, but he was a master human being. I think he really had a lot of answers for us. I hope that was valuable to you for today. My name is Joe Peroni. This is the Rise Above Project. Please subscribe and tell a friend. Thank you.